A voice like carved marble and molten gold. Not just a great singer, but a great presence. When Jessye Norman sang, the world seemed to pause. You didn't just listen to her, you experienced her. I remember the moment Jessye Norman cast her spell over me. It was during my student years with my dear friend Sam. We had a recording of Strauss's Four Last Songs, and we played it over and over, hour after hour, almost in a trance. The sheer, overwhelming brightness of that voice in Und die Seele unbewacht, soaring, radiant, impossible to ignore. The audible breath after Ist dies etwa der Tod? As if Strauss himself had written it. A human heartbeat before the end, and that regal sound, majestic, unshakable, magnificent. My first wife had once played with her during her time in the National Youth Orchestra. She told me how, incredibly, the chair Jessye was sitting on had broken during a rehearsal. And Jessye, she didn't blush or fluster. She laughed warmly and made everyone laugh with her. She was kind and gracious to all the young players, taking time to speak to them and make them feel welcome. Years later, when Sam married the legendary pianist Gabriela Montero, he found himself at the White House while Gabby was playing for President Obama. He messaged me, "Mike, in the toilet at the White House, Gabby playing for Obama here. I am sitting next to Jessye Norman." I told her, "Tell her, Sam, tell her everything." Minutes later, the reply came, "I've told her, Mike, I've told her." And that, for me, felt like a perfect full circle. Jessye Norman was born in Augusta, Georgia in 1945 into a segregated society that did not expect to produce one of the greatest sopranos of the 20th century. She grew up surrounded by gospel and church music, and even as a child, her voice had presence. She studied first at Howard University, then at the Peabody Conservatory, and finally the University of Michigan, building her craft layer by layer, breath first, tone second, and only then moving into the repertoire that would define her. In 1968, she won the ARD International Music Competition in Munich, leading to a Berlin debut as Elisabeth in Tannhäuser, a role demanding both freshness and heroic stamina. After that Berlin debut, Jessye Norman became a sought-after presence across Europe. She sang at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, then at the Scala Covent Garden and the Vienna State Opera, not as an emerging talent, but as an artist who seemed to arrive fully formed. From the beginning, she never played small to fit a stage. Her voice had the same structural integrity in any venue, breath pressure consistent, vowels perfectly aligned to resonance, and tone released rather than pushed. That is how she could go from Mozart to Wagner without strain. By the mid-1970s, she was expanding her repertoire with roles that showcased her versatility. Mozart's Countess, Strauss's Ariadne, Wagner's Sieglinde, and Berlioz's Cassandra and Didon. She was equally at home in recitals, singing French melody, German lieder, and contemporary works with the same sense of line and textual weight she brought to the opera stage. What set her apart technically was not just the size of the voice, but the shape of it. A broad, column-like resonance, evenly balanced across the range. Her middle voice was enormous, but never heavy. In the upper register, she did not thin the tone to reach the top. She kept the resonance anchored, which gave her high notes their unmistakable gleam. When she sang the Four Last Songs with orchestras in Berlin, London, and New York, critics reached for metaphors of cathedrals, mountain ranges, and the ocean. Her sound had both grandeur and intimacy, vast in scale, yet deeply human in expression. This is the paradox every great singer strives for, to be monumental and personal at the same time. Jessye mastered it. The regal stillness of her physical presence was matched by a voice that seemed to contain an entire world. By the mid-1980s, she was one of the highest paid and most celebrated sopranos in the world, commanding stages at the Metropolitan Opera, the Paris Opera, and Salzburg Festival. Yet she never abandoned the recital platform. often saying that the intimacy of song allowed her to connect with audiences in a way no grand staging could. One of her most celebrated Metropolitan nights came in 1993, when she sang Ariadne auf Naxos. The portrayal was regal yet vulnerable, vocally sumptuous and physically commanding. Strauss at his most opulent, filtered through a singer who understood both the architecture and the humanity of the role. Her history with the Vier Four Last Songs began early and never left her. She performed them with the world's greatest orchestras and conductors. The 1983 Philips recording with Kurt Masur and the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra is widely considered definitive. On YouTube, people write things like, "This CD got me through some tough times," and "My favorite album of all time." This is absolutely the best there is. She was equally at home in Wagner, Elisabeth in Tannhäuser, Sieglinde in Die Walküre, and in Berlioz, where her Cassandra in Les Troyens combined commanding dramatic presence with flawless French diction. Her ability to cross vocal categories was legendary. She could sing mezzo-soprano roles such as Gluck's Orfeo or Berlioz's Didon, then soar as Ariadne, Sieglinde, or the Kaiserin in Die Frau ohne Schatten. This was not marketing, it was technical mastery, adjusting resonance, breath pacing, and vowel shape to suit the tessitura while keeping the voice unified. Beyond opera, she was a supreme recitalist, moving from German lieder to French melody, from American art song to the Negro spirituals that were so important to her. She treated spirituals with the same respect, diction, and polish as Schubert or Dubach, quietly asserting their place in the classical canon. When we talk about Jessye Norman, we inevitably come to the question, what made her different? What made her instantly recognizable, even to the casual listener? First, there was the sound, a vast column-like resonance that seemed to be built on granite, yet capable of the softest, most fragile shimmer. The middle register was like a cathedral nave, the upper register like a sunbeam cutting through stained glass. For singers, that quality comes from a perfectly balanced breath column, a relaxed yet anchored larynx, and an absolute refusal to over-modify vowels or volume. She let the resonance do the work. Her legato was not just smooth, it had shape and inevitability. She thought in paragraphs, not sentences. Every note belonged to a larger arc, sustained by breath energy that never sagged or spiked. And then there was her approach to language. Jessye could sculpt vowels with the precision of a master craftsman. Her mouth, sometimes in purely vocal pedagogical terms, perhaps too open, became in her case a tool of artistry, a hammer and chisel, shaping each vowel and consonant into something of absolute beauty. You can hear that same shaping when she speaks, every word placed, balanced and resonant. She seemed to be able to darken a vowel to add weight or lighten it to lift the line, making the sound itself a living, changeable material. Her stage presence was regal, composed, commanding. She could walk on stage and do nothing, yet control the air in the room. That stillness was never emptiness. It was energy held in perfect reserve, released only when the music called for it. And she was not just an opera singer. Jessye Norman became a cultural figure whose recognition went far beyond the opera house. She was known to people who never attended a single opera, appearing at presidential inaugurations, national ceremonies, Olympic events, and in high-profile interviews, where her intelligence, wit, and humanity shone just as brightly as her artistry. Jessye also chose her repertoire with care. She sang music that met her voice where it lived, roles and songs that matched the nobility of her tone and the expansiveness of her phrasing. That is why she never sounded miscast, and why her voice retained its majesty to the very end. In short, Jessye Norman was not just a great singer, she was a complete artist, a voice of mind and presence, and a musician who understood that every element of performance was a part of a larger whole. If you're enjoying these tribute videos to the great singers and the Monday teaching videos that I make, and you wish to support the channel, you can now do so via the link in the description to buy me a coffee. Any spare dollars you got lying around that you throw in my direction will go such a long way to me keeping the lights on, paying the bills, and continuing to make these videos where we talk about the great artists. And if you can't do that or you don't wish to, that's absolutely fine. A like, a comment, and a subscribe means the world to me. Now, back to Jessye Norman. Some critics accused her of being too monumental, too grand in her interpretations. Others commented on her spoken accent as though it were a flaw. But that accent was shaped by a lifetime of work across multiple languages, letting the sounds of French and German blend into her speech. And when she sang, any suggestion of imperfection vanished. Her vowels and consonants were idiomatic, her phrasing deeply respectful of each language's music. Her grandeur was not indulgence, it was intention. She believed music, whether Wagner, Berlioz or Strauss, or the simplest spiritual, could sustain vastness, nobility and weight, and she had the courage to bring that conviction to the stage every time. Growing up in segregated Georgia, Jessye knew the importance of representation, especially for singers of color. Her very presence on the world's great stages was a statement that they too belonged there. In 2003, she co-founded the Jessye Norman School of the Arts in Augusta, a tuition-free after-school program for underprivileged children. She remained deeply involved, raising funds and shaping its mission. She never married and she had no children, but her influence on younger artists was profound. Colleagues called her a force of nature, and Edward Rothstein of the New York Times wrote that her voice was a grand mansion of sound. It contained sunlit rooms, narrow passageways, cavernous halls. So what does Jessye Norman's singing mean? It stands for something noble, regal, and magnificent. It represents a standard of artistry that refuses to compromise. Music elevated to its highest purpose. When she sang, she reminded us of the dignity of the human spirit, of the beauty that discipline and imagination can create. Her voice carried not just melody and words, but the weight of culture, history, and humanity itself. Every time I wish to be amazed and to be awed, every time I want to believe in God or in something beyond what I can see and feel, every time I want to have an out-of-body experience, I know exactly what to do. I go into a quiet room, put on my headphones and play her recording of Strauss's Four Last Songs. And every single time I feel I have touched God, touched heaven, because of the sheer genius of three people: the composer Richard Strauss, the conductor Kurt Masur, and the one and only Jessye Norman. If I were ever stranded on a desert island and could only take one CD, I might take that one. For me, it is the most complete, the most perfect expression of what music can be. She was, quite simply, godlike. As we listen to this performance of the Saint-Saëns aria, we can see that she's not just singing, she's inhabiting the role. She's turned the concert stage into an opera stage. Her eyes are burning with the situation, the need she has to get Samson to do her bidding. The terribly slow tempo, which could sound self-indulgent in another singer, but here sounds absolutely correct. The way she's shaping the words and the sheer bravura of taking so much time, making these pauses and diminuendos and climaxes as big and as broad as they possibly could. As somebody says in the comment underneath this video, this performance alone is reason to make Jessye Norman one of the greatest singers of all time. She was a singer that didn't just sing, she made you feel, and she brought her whole immense presence to the music she sang. This is one of the greatest moments on YouTube. Jessye Norman died on September the 13th, 2019 in New York City, aged 74. From complications of a spinal cord injury sustained in 2015. Her funeral in Augusta and a memorial at the Metropolitan Opera brought together the world's musical community to honor her. And yet for me, the memory of her artistry is not just in the big public moments. It's in those late night listenings with Sam, in the awe of hearing Four Last Songs for the 100th time and still feeling my heart stop. It's in knowing that when Sam told her our story, she heard it, she knew. Jessye Norman will always be more than a great soprano. She was a beacon, a reminder that art can be vast and human at the same time, that you can carry dignity and warmth, majesty and kindness all in the same breath. She showed that technique, intellect and soul are not separate in great singing, they are one. Her voice may no longer fill the air, but it still fills the heart. And as long as there are singers who believe in the power of a single perfect phrase, Jessye Norman's legacy will live on.